Chapter 11 Ask a Girl Out. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Suzanne had been waiting for the right time to make her next move. The doctor's appointment had been on a Monday, but it wasn't until nearly a week later that she deemed it time to move forward. After dinner on Sunday night, Suzanne was over at the plumber's and her daughter Amy was not, so she decided it was a good opportunity for a talk. Suzanne's task was made easier when Susan began the discussion. The two mothers sat with Alan and Catherine in the living room, after a TV show that they'd all been watching had ended. Susan and Catherine were dressed normally, but Suzanne was dressed to the nines in a silky dark blue evening gown. Suzanne wanted to look especially tempting for Alan, but she dressed so well most of the time that this wasn't thought of as that unusual. Susan said, "Suzanne, I think you'll agree with me. Don't you think it's high time that, in light of my son's peculiar situation, that he asks a girl out?" "Ugh," Alan said with a heavy sigh. "I was afraid you were going to say that eventually." He sighed again. "Look, I've already given this a lot of consideration. A ton of thought. As you all know, since we're such a gossipy family, the only girl at school I'm really interested in is Christine. And she won't have anything to do with me." "We all know that, Tiger," said his mother. All three females there knew the details of his life nearly as well as he did. She asked, "But how can you be sure she'll say no unless you ask her?" His sister butted in to defend her brother. "Mom, I see Christine all the time at school, okay? She's so aloof. She's like an ice queen goddess or something. In fact, that's what everyone calls her, Ice Queen Christine. A lot of guys want to ask her out but nobody's had the guts. Nobody that I know of, at least. She looks like a goddess too. I hate to say this, but she's out of brother's league. She's out of everyone's league. You're not asking an easy thing here. If I were a guy, I would be way intimidated." Suzanne stood up and began pacing about in front of Alan. She responded, "Yeah, but you have to admit that if she did want to go out with someone, who else would it be if not Sweetie? And she never dates, and she must want to date someone. I'll bet she's jealous of someone like you, Angel." Catherine's new status as a varsity cheerleader automatically made her very popular with the guys, so she suddenly had no shortage of guys wanting to date her. But she'd turned down all but the most refined and respectable of suitors. Alan found himself exceedingly distracted by Suzanne's sexy dress. "Still," he answered, "I tell you she'd shoot me down. It's just not happening, okay? It's like she's Ms. Universe or whatever the title is, and I'm Quasimodo. Forget it." He sighed heavily. Susan piped in, "Then why don't you ask someone else out and work your way up to Christine?" "Who else?" he asked desperately. "There is nobody else I'm interested in." That wasn't true. He also had a crush on Ms. Reimer, his attractive history teacher, but he didn't want to mention that, especially since he couldn't ask her out anyway because of their age difference and their student-teacher relationship. Suzanne preened, with an arm raised up to better show herself off. "Too bad I'm not 20 years younger, or I'd go out with you and I'd definitely make it worth your while. Heck, I'd still be happy to show you a good time, even at my age." She winked as she added, "My husband's just going to have to learn to share." Alan was floored by that, nearly completely forgetting about his current crisis. He stammered. His dick started to grow erect. Susan insisted, "We could help you find someone, Tiger. We have to find someone. You just can't handle this medical situation all by yourself." Suzanne cut in. She stepped forward, bent over, put her hand on Alan's knee, and said to him, "No, you're going to need help reaching your daily 6x day climax quota. A lot of help. But don't worry, I'll lend a hand." Her hand on his knee started to stroke its way up and down Alan's leg, but mostly up. Alan found himself fully hard as he noticed the way his Aunt Susie was stroking his thigh, comparing it to the way he'd sometimes dreamt of her stroking his erection. And with her leaning over him, he couldn't help but notice how hard and protruding her nipples were. He suddenly found it very difficult to breathe, he was so aroused and excited. But Susan wrenched him back to his predicament by saying, "See. Everyone here is so eager to help you. Between Suzanne and me, we can put our feelers out there, and find out if there's someone who likes you. Angel, you could help with that too, couldn't you?" However, what Susan meant by help was different than what Suzanne meant by help. The innocent mother didn't see the sexual meaning in Suzanne's words and gestures. "No." Alan interrupted. "I can't ask someone out if I don't really like them. I just don't work that way. I have to feel very strongly about the person." Catherine responded, "Well then, we know there is one other person at school that fits that description. A certain older woman." She giggled. Alan blushed. He knew his sister was alluding to his crush on his teacher, Ms. Reimer. He'd had a crush on her for 3 years, ever since he'd had a class with her in the 9th grade. "Hey, I thought I told you that in complete secrecy," he wailed. "I'm so jealous," Suzanne cooed in a sensual moan while she continued to stroke Alan's thigh. "Although it does turn me on that you're attracted to older women. Ms. Reimer doesn't know how lucky she is. Arg," he exclaimed as his teacher's name was mentioned. Between what was being discussed and the way Suzanne was practically coming on to him, he hardly knew up from down. Susan spoke up, "We all know, Tiger. You know that, I'm sure. Suzanne and I were talking about it just the other day, in fact. I'm afraid your heart is an open book around here. Roarorg." He shook his fists in frustration. "As if things aren't embarrassing enough, you have to bring that up. I know you know, but I thought it was something not to talk about openly. I feel really embarrassed about it." Alan's silly teacher crush. Alan, the love-struck teacher's pet. Naya Naya Naya. "I feel so exposed, I might as well just walk around completely naked." Suzanne inwardly chuckled with glee, imagining him literally doing just that. Excellent. If only. Hold your horses, Suzanne. You'll see this young hunk parading around naked soon enough if you play your cards right. She said in her sexy growl, "That sounds delicious." All in favor, raise their hands. She chuckled as she raised her hand. Alan was both relieved and disappointed that Suzanne stopped stroking his leg to raise her hand. She partly made up for it, though, by striking another sexy pose. "Sorry, bro," Catherine started to say. But Alan cut her off. "Look. What you're asking for is impossible. Impossible." Suzanne bent over him again, practically touching his face with her dangling, barely contained breasts. She put a hand on his shoulder and another on his thigh. "Sweetie, please. Pretty please. Won't you try, for me?" Alan couldn't think straight. Suzanne's hands seemed to be all over him, gently coaxing and stroking. Her perfume was fogging his brain and she was staring right into his eyes. He worried that her wandering hands would soon come across his bulging erection. If she touched him there, he was liable to come on the spot, and that would be the most embarrassing thing that had ever happened to him. To his great alarm, one of her hands was just inches away from his bulge and slowly getting closer. Suddenly he blurted out, all right. I know that you're all going to keep pressuring me until I give in and ask someone out. So I'd better do it sooner rather than later and get it over with. I'll ask Christine out tomorrow." "Great." All the women gathered round. Somehow he found himself standing up, and they began hugging him, all talking rapidly, and even high-fiving each other. They were a very spirited family. A short time later, Susan cornered Suzanne in the kitchen for a private chat. Suzanne, I couldn't help but notice that you're wearing a fancy evening gown. And, you're not going to any kind of charity ball or something like that later, are you?" "No." "And, you seemed to be, around Tiger earlier." "Well, Susan was blushing profusely and was too embarrassed to get to the point. Suzanne saw her friend's plight and helped out with straight talk. Susan, yes, I'm dressing this way on purpose around Sweetie, to help him reach his daily target. But it's not only that. I've told you many times before that if you want to get a man to do something, you need to use your feminine wiles and attributes. He was adamant about not asking out Christine until I turned on the charm. Then he crumbled like a cookie. Did you see? I did. But is that, Susan, that's a form of helping out, too. When you know what you want, you just have to go out and make it happen. Besides, I killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Did you see him rush to his room right after we finished talking? What do you suppose he's doing up there? Susan blushed a deep red as she formed a mental image of her son masturbating. Now that she'd seen Akami jacking him off, she could envision it very clearly indeed. Alan did climax quickly, this time by thinking about Suzanne. But all too soon his depression returned as he realized he'd made a commitment to ask out the feared Christine, the Ice Queen. He went back downstairs because it seemed better than ruminating about that problem on his own. The others spent the rest of the evening giving him advice and building up his confidence. He acted optimistic around the 3 women, but it was just an act. He felt like someone who had already been sentenced to the gallows at dawn. Chapter 12 Disaster. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The next day at school, Alan was a complete nervous wreck. He felt like he'd been given an ultimatum and basically had to ask Christine out no matter what. To make matters worse, he shared almost every class with her. He kept glancing at her, usually sideways since she typically sat next to him, trying to figure out when to talk to her. More importantly, he struggled to figure out what he might say, which left him feeling even more like a condemned man being sent to the gallows for a public execution. He had a good opportunity to talk to her at lunch but was too nervous to do so. When school let out he was absolutely desperate. Given how miserable he felt, he was determined to get it over with so he wouldn't have to go through the same agony all over again the next day. He followed Christine like a silent stalker until finally, at the bicycle rack, she abruptly turned around to face him and barked, "What?" "Ha!" Alan blinked. He hadn't expected her to be mad at him. He looked around, seriously contemplating escape routes. She walked to where he stood about 10 feet away and came right up to his face. "What is it already, Alan? You've been acting weird all day and now you're following me. Do you have something you want to say?" He was literally trembling all over. He'd heard stories about how Christine had shot down other guys who dared to ask her out. According to one story, after one particularly arrogant guy had asked her for a date, she'd smiled happily and said gaily, "Of course I'll go out with you, just as soon as you have the surgery." The guy was both elated and confused, so he naturally asked, "What surgery?" She answered in a suddenly harsh and biting voice, "The surgery to remove your head from where it's shoved up your ass." Alan hoped and prayed that the stories weren't true, but he suspected that they were because Christine did not suffer fools gladly. Since he had never asked a girl out before, he didn't have a clue on how to best make his move. At the moment, all he knew was that he wanted to get it over with immediately so his suffering would come to an end. He closed his eyes and blurted out, "Yeah, I do want to ask you something. Christine, will you go out with me? You know, like, on a date." He was so afraid that he kept his eyes closed. His heart pounded like a big bass drum while he waited for her response. He braced himself for the harsh put down to come. However, after an excruciatingly long pause, Christine said in a voice that was still testy but a little bit softer and kinder, "You can open your eyes, you know." He opened his eyes and forced himself to look in her direction. It happened that since she was feeling awkward, she held her hands together and was squeezing her arms inwards in a way that pushed her large 38F breasts forward and made them appear even bigger than their already tremendous size. She was wearing a very conservatively cut peach-colored top that exposed no cleavage at all. But although she always dressed to play down her assets and even wore minimizer bras with extra padding to help hide her nipples, there was simply no way to disguise just how busty she was. Despite Alan's great nervousness, he found himself getting an erection. It happened to him almost every time he was near her, no matter what the occasion. He silently hoped and prayed she wouldn't notice it, let alone make a snide comment about it. Christine's face was deadly serious, but then she smiled encouragingly when he looked her in the eye. However, her smile was very brief, after which she went right back to an intense stare and a grimace of sorts, which indicated that she was thinking deeply. But to Alan in his current worried mood, it looked like she was trying to decide which implements to use to cut him into little pieces. Finally, after even more painful silence, she said with carefully chosen words, "Alan, I'm flattered. But this is so unexpected. I like you, as a friend, but I've never thought of you, you know, that way." "I see." His whole body slumped. Christine was still at a loss. What were you thinking when you asked me out?" "Oh God, I'm so sorry." He'd given up already and wanted to flee. "No, I didn't mean it like that. Like I said, I'm flattered. I know there are all kinds of exaggerated stories about me being uncommonly cruel to the guys who ask me out. Really, I'm not that bad." She tried to give him an encouraging smile. "I know that it couldn't have been easy for you to ask, so I'm just wondering what changed. I thought we were doing pretty well as friends." He thought, what am I supposed to say, that I have this strange medical diagnosis and I need a girlfriend to help me get off 6 times a day? Or that I like you a lot as a friend but that's not enough because I'm absolutely obsessed by your gigantic breasts. Jesus. This is so awkward. Come on, Alan. Just tell her the truth. Minus those 2 things, obviously. His eyes dropped to her chest and he blurted out, "We are. Definitely. But we're not that close, really. And I want to be closer. You see, I've had a crush on you for a long time. You're just so beautiful. And I'm not just talking about your big chest like all the other guys, although, God, that is, they are, pretty dang, attractive." Alan was thinking to himself, duh. Shut up. You're really putting your foot in your mouth. You're not supposed to talk about her breasts, and keep your eyes on her face, for Christ's sake. By sheer force of will, he stared into her eyes with surprising intensity as he spoke with increasing passion. "What I mean is, the main thing I love is your face. You're just so heartbreakingly beautiful that I could stare into your eyes for hours. But it's not only that. You're so smart too. I know there's this really amazing girl behind the body, behind the spell. Binding eyes. I really like talking to you, and you know, being with you. Hanging out, you know. I mean, I'd want to go out with you even if you didn't look so, curvy, just 'cause I'd rather talk to you than anyone else in class. You know. I mean, I just feel like, well, we have a lot in common and we just click." She just stared at him. Her silence and her stare were unnerving. He started to falter and looked away. "Don't we? I mean, I think we do. God, I'm rambling. You can, tell me to shut up at any time." He was blushing fully now and thought, now I've really done it. She thinks I'm some kind of breast freak, like all the other guys who ask her out. But the truth is that I really do think she's amazing over and above her body. The problem is that she's too amazing. Why would someone so accomplished and beautiful ever go out with someone like me? Now I've totally ruined everything. I'll never be able to look her in the eye again. For a while Christine appeared to be busy thinking, but then she finally smiled. When she was serious, she had no idea how intimidating her intense stare could be. But when she smiled like that, Alan found her so beautiful and desirable that he wanted to jump for joy and write 1,000 songs about her. He dared to raise his hopes again. Then she said, "Alan, you know, I do like you a lot. But the things you're talking about that you like, don't they just mean that we should be good friends? Well, most of them, anyway. I like you too, but just as, you know, a friend. He felt crushed. Oh. I see. He looked as completely crestfallen as he felt. He started to back away from her. Yeah. That's a good idea. Friends. Okay, I'll see you at school tomorrow, right? She looked at him with concern. Wait. I don't mean it like that. Please don't be offended, okay? It's just that this is all so sudden and I'm not ready for a serious relationship. Really, if I did want to go out with anyone, it would be you. I mean it. Maybe, you know, sometime later. He nodded far too agreeably as he continued to slowly back away. Yeah. Later. Sounds good. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow then. He turned and walked away as rapidly as he could without appearing to run. When he went around the corner of a nearby school building and was finally out of her sight, he did in fact start running. Even though he had ridden his bicycle to school, he ran all the way home. As soon as he reached his room, he collapsed on his bed, feeling depressed and morose. The problem was, he really was in love with Christine, as well as in lust with her body. He was completely inconsolable. Some of the things she'd said at the end, such as that if she did go out with anyone it would be him, or that she might be more amenable to the idea later, he disregarded as little niceties to soften the blow. Although he didn't realize it, she actually did mean them. She had been sorely tempted to say yes despite the rather timid and bumbling way he'd asked her out. She did like him a lot and she knew that he was the first suitor who could appreciate her brilliant mind as well as her incredible body. She wasn't entirely sure why she told him no, but as soon as he was gone she regretted it. She also felt horrible that she had left him in such an obviously distressed state, leaving her feeling too embarrassed to face him and talk things out. She'd rejected him largely out of instinct. Some of it had to do with the way he'd sprung the idea on her from out of the blue, and some had to do with her own self-confidence issues and her resulting fear of intimacy. She also had a few reservations about him, especially because he was considered a nerd and a nobody in the school power hierarchy, unlike herself. She had a reputation to maintain, and she was particularly worried about being seen as too square and nerdy. Unfortunately, dating Alan would have resulted in a lot of flack for her. But a lot of it was because of the clumsy, nervous, inarticulate manner in which he had asked her for a date. Had he been more suave about it, and especially if he'd built up to it with hints and flirting, he almost certainly would have gotten a different answer. She really did like him a lot and found him funny, cute, well-built, and nearly her academic peer. Unfortunately, Alan didn't realize that. He decided that he'd never stood a chance with her and never would. He resolved to harden his heart and try to get over his feelings for her, but it wasn't easily done. He kicked himself over and over for not being more suave and assertive, not to mention his ramblings about her breasts. He dreaded having to face her again in school. Chapter 13 Sex Things Up. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The whole rest of the school week was like a nightmare for Alan. Very few females truly attracted him, probably because he had such high standards from living with the likes of his mother Susan and sister Catherine. But when one did, his feelings were powerfully strong. With Christine out of the picture, there seemed to be no one else to help him with his medical treatment difficulties. The fact that he was also in lust for his history teacher, Ms. Reimer, only increased his frustration, because she was completely unattainable. Not only was she a teacher, but she also had a serious boyfriend named Garth whom she'd been seeing for about a year. He thought, it's my senior year in high school, and I still haven't even kissed a girl. My friends wonder about me. Now there's this huge pressure to find somebody, anybody, and I can't do it. People say I'm good looking, but I'm such a loser with women. I give up with this whole stupid 6x day treatment thing. It's ridiculous. You just can't ask someone to do something as private as that so damned often. Day after day passed without him masturbating a single time. Socially, he did little more than come straight home from school and mope. Friday and Saturday nights passed without any social plans on Alan's part. He still felt incredibly depressed and just stayed in his room. Back when he had first launched into his new 6.times-day duties, he made a chart so he could check off how many orgasms he had a day. That way he could make sure to keep his average up. But now he threw the chart away and failed to masturbate at all. Even thoughts of Akami couldn't excite him anymore. She seemed like a distant, fading dream. The first time he got aroused again was on Friday night when Suzanne came by after dinner, like she almost always did. Eager to see how Alan would react, she sat chatting with him wearing a nice business suit, but without any panties. Alan naturally assumed that she'd made an unprecedented mistake in forgetting to wear any. She kept her legs closed most of the way so he wouldn't freak out too much, but she could tell by the lump in his shorts that it was enough to have a definite effect. However, this display made him only more despondent. Alan felt there would be something wrong with masturbating to images of his Aunt Susie, so the erotic imagery of her now in his mind only made his situation more agonizing. Catherine also contributed to his problem. She was dressing a lot more casually around the house, which led to him thinking carnally of her as well, but that filled him with nothing but shame. The only people who sexually excited him now were the very people he was determined not to think about in that way. By Saturday night, Susan was extremely concerned. It was obvious to her that their pressure on him to ask Christine out had backfired. Suzanne, however, was secretly pleased that everything was going according to her plan. From what she knew of Christine, the Ice Queen, and Alan's feelings for her, she had expected this to happen. Now it was time to spring the next part of her plan into action. Because neither of the mothers had any Saturday night events scheduled, they just sat commiserating together in Susan's bedroom as the evening wore on. Susan actually cried on Suzanne's shoulder. She sobbed, "I'm a failed mother. Tiger just sits there in his room. I've destroyed his social life altogether, and his medical treatment plan is in tatters." Suzanne had her arm around her BFF and consoled her with friendly words. After Susan had vented her feelings, Suzanne spoke encouragingly. "Let's not just wait around. We need to come up with some other plan that will make Sweetie happy and bring back his energy. We have to be clever, and be bold." Susan tried to think, but nothing came to her. She'd gone over the problem in her mind already plenty of times. "What about hiring a professional?" Suzanne finally asked. "Have you given that any consideration?" "That sounds so crude." Susan answered. "Are you suggesting some kind of prostitute?" "That would basically be what it is. I'd never have my son sleep with a prostitute. How do you even find such a person? Not to mention, how do we know if such a person will talk or not? You never know. Pick the wrong person, and they might even try blackmail. My husband is rich, after all. Anyway, that might help him for a day or two, but Tiger's medical treatment requires him to have a lot of prolonged sexual activity every single day." "You're right," said Suzanne. "We shouldn't let any strangers know about this problem. And clearly he isn't going to have the nerve to ask someone else out for a long time. But we can't do nothing, because he's lost all interest in doing his thing." Vague phrases like "doing his thing" had become suddenly popular in the Plummer household, allowing everyone to avoid words like masturbate. After a pause, Suzanne added, "So I only see one solution." "What's that?" "We have to kind of sex things up a bit so he'll get over Christine and get back on track. Otherwise there's no telling how long he'll mope around like this. You know how sensitive kids are to being rejected. It could be months. We have to undo the damage we did by forcing him to ask her out, and undo it fast." "Sex things up. What on earth do you mean by that?" "What I mean is, we women who know of his problem have to act sexier. That's all. So he'll be distracted. You know, dress more provocatively. Be more open about sexuality, and allow him to be more open. For instance, help him get over this hang up that masturbation is a horrible thing. And why should we be afraid to even say that word? We should treat it just like a normal thing, like taking out the trash or something. Then he'll be able to do it easily, at any time. Like taking out the trash. Susan repeated incredulously. Have you lost your mind? It's not like taking out the trash at all. It's a terrible sin. And anyway, this sexing things up idea, you know where that'll lead. He'll start having sexy thoughts about us. About you. About me. About Angel even, maybe. Is that what you want? Isn't that incest? Maybe we need to get him more pornographic material instead. Otherwise, who knows what he'll do? Do you want him to actually, do his thing while thinking about you? No, said Suzanne with pretend indignation. Of course that wouldn't be my first choice. But what is the alternative? When he was doing his thing last week, he was obviously thinking about Christine. But now that won't work. Thinking about a naked woman in a magazine may work every once in a while, but it's completely different than interacting with a real human being. It's also not healthy for him psychologically. Think about that woman Akami actually massaging Sweetie's penis, compared to a photograph or even a video of the same thing. The other two just can't compete. I don't know about that, Susan disagreed reflexively, even as she grew uncomfortable recalling what Akami had done right before her eyes. The room suddenly seemed very warm to her. Suzanne was glad Susan had said that, as it gave her a chance to elaborate. She needed to get Susan aroused to open her up to new possibilities, and she'd found out from Dr. Fredrickson just how unexpectedly sexual things had gotten during Alan's doctor visit. She prodded, they can't. You were there. Don't you remember? Don't you remember watching Akami's hands sliding up and down on Sweetie's thick erection, over and over and over? Don't you remember her wet fingers slipping all over his pulsing hardness? Have you forgotten her blowing on it, the smell of sex in the air, the sounds of sexual fluid squishing around? For a moment, Susan was transported back to that day. Her arousal level shot sky high. But then, realizing that Suzanne was just asking a question, she snapped back from her reverie. I deny everything. I wasn't watching, really. It was all medically necessary, anyway. She blushed furiously. Suzanne was amused by the denials, but kept that to herself. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just pointing out the power of the live experience, compared to pictures or even movies. It's too bad Akami is going out with someone, 'cause I think he kind of liked her. Is she? Shoot, Susan answered. She was grateful for the change of topic. But Suzanne changed it right back. Yeah, too bad. Obviously, Sweetie was very excited by her attention. I'll bet he spent a lot of time since then fantasizing about her hands caressing and stroking his big erection. I'm sure he'd love nothing better than to have her hands on his hot erection, teasing it, pleasing it, squeezing his warm cum out every day, over and over again. 6 times a day, in fact. Suzanne, please. Must you use words like that? It's obscene. Words like what? I didn't say cock or even dick. I'm just talking about his big erection. That's a medical term. Is it not true that he had a long, thick, hard erection, all full of semen, or was it flaccid the whole time? The last thing Susan wanted to think about was the image of Akami caressing Alan's hard on. That gave rise to very troubling thoughts. Ever since the doctor's visit, she had been almost completely successful in blocking the medical appointment out of her mind, but it lurked somewhere subconsciously. Now all those thoughts and images were back with a vengeance. It's true, she conceded. What, that he was flaccid the whole time? That's not what I heard before. No, that he was, Suzanne played dumb and looked at her quizzically. Susan said with growing frustration. His member. It was erect. His, big, erection. She didn't realize how much her chest was heaving as she imagined his erection being stroked by the nurse. Suzanne suddenly changed direction. Susan, don't misunderstand me. I understand your position. You're his mother, even though you're not his real biological mother. You need to keep a certain distance there. But I'm not his mother, I'm just a close friend. You know I love him dearly. I would do anything to help him. If that means being sexier so he can get over Christine, and yes, even have him think about me while he's doing his thing, I'm willing to pay that price. That's how much I love him. Whatever it takes to get him to ejaculate 6 times a day, that's what I'm willing to do. Susan was amazed. Ejaculate. Whatever it takes. Just how far are you willing to go? She had trouble saying the word ejaculate at all. It rolled out of her mouth like child rapist. Obviously not that far, in reality. I am a married woman after all. She hoped Susan wouldn't recall all of her adulterous affairs at that particular moment. Suzanne continued, what I mean to say is, if acting coy, maybe showing a little skin here and there, maybe brushing up against him now and then, or letting him accidentally touch me. If maybe doing those kinds of things will get him back on track with his program, I'd be willing to do that. You know I'm good at flirting. I know not only how to use it, but to control it. I'm not worried about things going too far. I don't want to lose my special relationship with my sweetie, I just want him to be healthy and happy. Now Suzanne looked like she would be the one to cry as she pondered Alan's so-called medical plight. She buried her face in Susan's shoulder, but it was an act. There, Susan consoled. Don't get upset. I don't mean to imply that I don't appreciate what you're suggesting. It's just so shocking. I'm not used to this kind of thing. I'll tell you what. If that's what you want to do, then it's okay by me. I'll try my best to be a little sexier and encouraging to him, but just a little. The burden is going to be on you, okay? Do you think you can handle that? Yes, said Suzanne. This was exactly the answer she'd been trying to steer Susan towards. She raised her face and looked at her best friend very intently. I've been thinking about this lately, and I have thought it through. I think it's the only way. I feel personally responsible for his failure with Christine, so I want to undo the damage. We pushed him too hard. At the same time, we can continue to keep our radar out there and maybe find him someone else at school he can be interested in. Then he'll transfer his affections and things can return back to normal. Suzanne fidgeted slightly before she continued, and in the process, maybe all of us can even gain something. For one, we could get you and your overly protected daughter to loosen up a bit. As Suzanne said this, she didn't realize Catherine had already started to think and act along similar lines, but she would have been pleased if she'd known. To see you become a little more relaxed about your sexuality wouldn't hurt either. When you go to the beach, you look like some kind of photograph of a Victorian-era woman, covered head to toe and even carrying an umbrella. I'm more fair-skinned than you. It's embarrassing being with you sometimes, you're so prudish. Come on, loosen up a little. I guess livening things up a bit wouldn't hurt, said Susan a bit doubtfully. Sure. It'll be fine. Here, I'll show you what I mean. She simply unbuttoned her blouse, revealing a sexy bra. In fact, both her nipples could be seen through the thin, gauzy fabric. You see. Instant sexy. If Sweetie walked in here and saw me like this, I'll bet that would help him reach his daily quota. Suzanne, how could you do that? It's so scandalous. Do you wear that kind of bra all the time? As a matter of fact Suzanne didn't, but there was no reason to let Susan know that. Sure. Why not? It feels good to feel sexy, even if it's only underneath and only for myself. But I think we should wear this kind of clothing around him sometimes. It'll really help him out. I don't know. Maybe you have the nerve to wear that around Tiger, but I never could. Even if it was just underneath my clothes. It's no problem. Here, I'll show you. Let's liven up Sweetie's sad evening a little bit. Cupping her hands to her mouth, she shouted, "Hey, Alan. Can you come here?" "No." Susan urgently whispered in dismay. "Quick, button up before he gets here." But by the time she said this, Alan was already walking the short distance down the hallway from his bedroom to hers. Just as he walked in, Suzanne said, "Sweetie, don't come in, I'm not decent." But he'd already taken a good look at Suzanne's chest by the time she said this. He stared for a second or two before averting his eyes, covering them with his hands. He blushed profusely, but still obediently waited by the door to the room to see why he was needed. Suzanne brushed off his brief glance. "No matter, sweetie. Good thing you didn't come in a few minutes ago, or you would have seen your mother and me completely naked. In any case, we were just thinking about renting a movie and wondering if you had any suggestions on what to get." I don't know." He was too freaked out to think. He was still trying to picture his mother and Aunt Susie naked and wondering what brought that about. His penis was painfully erect. "Okay. Think about it, and let us know," Suzanne said casually. "Okay." He dashed back to his room. His glance had been so brief he wasn't sure what he'd seen. Did I see her nipples through that bra? Nah. Susan witnessed the whole thing with a horrified face and immediately chastised Suzanne. "How could you? That's unbelievable." Suzanne buttoned her top back up. "No, it isn't. Now witness. Let's wait about 1 minute, then go to the door to Sweetie's room. I'll bet you anything that he's masturbating furiously for the first time in days." Susan couldn't help but satisfy her curiosity about Suzanne's prediction. They went to the door and listened, but Alan was being too quiet for them to hear much, and his bed didn't have squeaky bed springs. So Suzanne knocked and said, "Alan, sweetie, can I come in?" No. Hold on. I'm not decent." He knew he shouldn't be jacking off while thinking about her, but he just couldn't help himself anymore, not after seeing glimpses of her pussy and then her nipples on succeeding days. He'd been going at it with pent-up abandon when he'd heard the knock on the door. Turning to Susan, Suzanne whispered, "You see. He got naked in 1 minute. I just cured his stimulation drought that easily. That's what we have to do." Susan looked at her friend with a skeptical and worried expression. "I don't know." "Are you sure?" Alan was upset at being interrupted, but not so upset that he didn't finish what he'd started, though it took him a moment to recover his mood. His thoughts returned to Suzanne once again when he masturbated later that night, just before going to sleep. That same night, Susan had a dream where she relived Alan's medical appointment in Akami's handjob. In it she didn't do anything but watch, just like what had really happened. But when she woke, she felt like she'd committed a horrible sin. Chapter 14. That's too revealing. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Suzanne launched into this new phase of her overall plan, now that she had begrudging acquiescence from Susan. The next evening, Suzanne came back to the Plummer house with a garment bag full of sexy clothes for Susan to try on. They were both big busted Amazon types, just 1 inch short of 6 feet, and they wore the same sizes in everything. Unlike Susan, who didn't have any revealing clothes at all, Suzanne liked to dress sexily on occasion. But she did it only when it wasn't a situation where she'd be overly annoyed by horny guys. Unfortunately, because she was so beautiful, that occurred almost every time she was in public. So she had a lot of clothes that she'd hardly ever worn except during her affairs. Following up on Susan's agreement the day before to, as Suzanne liked to put it, sex things up a bit, Suzanne convinced Susan to try on some of her dressier clothes. Back in the master bedroom, which was effectively Susan's private bedroom since her husband was never around, the two of them sat on the edge of Susan's big bed and looked through the garment bag. In front of them was a large floor-to-ceiling mirror. Suzanne broke the ice by picking out something not too daring and trying it out. The first thing she did was to stand up and casually take off all her clothes. Suzanne. Susan chided, "What do you think you're doing? Have some decency. I've never seen you naked. It's so not done." "Susan, these clothes we're trying on, they're really meant to be worn without any underwear. For instance, look at this top." She pulled a top down over her head and put it on. There was so much cleavage showing that it was clear no bra could be worn with it. "You see, this top just won't work with a bra. Even a strapless bra won't help." Suzanne was still naked from the waist down, which Susan found extremely disconcerting. "I don't care about that," said a blushing Susan, "so much as it bothers me you're not wearing anything. A little lower. Won't you please put the rest of the outfit on?" "Oh, right," Suzanne said, as if she'd just forgotten to do so. "But really, Susan, lighten up a bit. This is what people do when they change clothes. They take their clothing off, and then put other clothing on. Really." Suzanne was secretly delighting in her friend's discomfort about showing off her body. Susan's body was so deliciously curvy that Suzanne was keen on seeing her friend completely naked, but she'd never had a chance in all the years they'd been best friends, even though they often worked out together. "Sorry, I'm just not used to this. I know I dress more modestly than most other people, but I just can't help it." "Susan, you can help it. You have to step out of your old habits already. Here, try something on." She handed Susan the garment bag. Susan looked for the item that would cover her the most completely. Then she went to the bathroom to change. After taking off all her clothes except her panties, she put the item on. A brown top which nearly covered her entire upper torso. However, there was a large strip running right down the middle of the front without any fabric at all, except a few thin strings running back and forth through the strip, making X's in a shoelace pattern. Worse, the strip was even wider in the middle, reaching right to the edge of her nipples. Her deep cavernous cleavage stood out from a mile away, as did her cute belly button. "Oh no. This is horrible. I could never wear this. Let's try another one, fast." They began trying on outfit after outfit. Actually it was nearly always Susan trying all the outfits, since Suzanne already knew her own clothes. However, there were a few outfits of Susan's that Suzanne wanted to try on. Suzanne generally sat naked or in her underwear, watching, making encouraging comments as Susan rejected item after item. Suzanne tried to touch her friend as much as possible under the guise of helping to put on the clothes, straightening out the fabric, and so on. This was an attempt to get Susan into a more erotic mood, and more accustomed to nakedness and touching. Suzanne was at least gratified that Susan eventually gave up about always needing to go to the bathroom to change. They went on changing clothes for over an hour, with Susan trying some items on several times, because she just couldn't find anything in which she felt comfortable in. Finally, Susan went to her own drawers and got out the most revealing clothes she owned, which consisted of short white tennis shorts that came down only an inch below her crotch, and a white tennis top that left her arms open and revealed some of her ample cleavage. "Is that sexy enough?" "I think it's all I can handle," said Susan while looking doubtfully in the mirror. "No way," Suzanne responded emphatically. "The stuff I'm wearing is way more revealing than that." Suzanne had chosen a strapless silky black dress. From her bust on down it covered things thoroughly. But there was just a straight line of fabric cutting across her breasts a fraction of an inch above her nipples, exposing the narrow, deep valley between her tits. There was little to hold it up, and in fact, unless she pulled it up constantly, it was likely to eventually fall off her chest altogether. "I can't wear something like you're wearing," Susan whined. "I'd die. Please, just for today, please just let me wear this." She tried to show off the tennis outfit sexily. "You wear that all the time, whenever you play tennis. But I'll be willing to concede if you wear it without a bra or panties." "What? No way. I'd never do that." "You see, that's your problem. Why do you think you and your husband have no love life? You need to learn how to be sexy, if only for your marriage. I've been bugging you for years. If I'm going this far. She waved a hand over her dress. You've got to go at least that far. She waved her other hand over the tennis shirt and shorts. Suzanne certainly didn't want Susan and Ron's love life to improve, since that would ruin her larger plan. In fact, she knew there was little to no chance of that happening, no matter how sexily Susan dressed. However, she knew that an argument like that would be the best way to manipulate Susan right at that moment toward the endpoint that Suzanne really wanted so much. Susan fidgeted. I don't know. I know I'm not perfect, but that's just the way I am. And what does it matter? I'm more likely to spot Bigfoot than to see my husband in this house. Suzanne was relentless. Susan, how can you be so selfish? Don't you care about your son's poor health? I know it's unorthodox, but this is a medical procedure. Look at the extremes I'm willing to go to in order to help him out. I'm not going to wear a bra or panties with this, I'll have you know. Susan had already realized that Suzanne wasn't wearing a bra, but she thought, not wearing panties in a summer dress that comes down only about 3 inches below her crotch. That's too revealing. I had no idea just how outrageous she could get. But she kept such thoughts to herself. No, I'm sorry, but I just can't. I feel so guilty not helping. I almost could, but your skirt is just too short. Can't we get one that's less scandalous? All right. Here's my compromise. You just wear a T-shirt and shorts, but no underwear. Okay, you win. But go easy on my son, okay? We just want to stir things up a little so his libido will get going again. We don't want to give him a heart attack. Fine. But you also have to tie your T-shirt in a way that exposes your firm, cute midriff. Susan sighed with exasperation. If you insist. Suzanne was pleased. Susan didn't seem to realize that a T-shirt and shorts without underwear would be even more arousing for Alan than the tennis outfit, which showed more skin overall but hit her best parts all too thoroughly. Chapter 15. Now my plan is really kicking into gear. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At about 8:30, shortly after the two women finished choosing their clothes, Alan left his room to forage in the kitchen for food. That's where he encountered his mother. She turned around rapidly to greet him. He noticed that her breasts bounced far more than usual as she did so. They finally jiggled to a stop, as if someone had shaken a bowl of gel. Holy crap. Why is my mom so bouncy all of a sudden? Her outfit is nothing unusual. Wait a minute. This is my mom we're talking about here. She never wears just a plain white T-shirt, much less one tied up to expose her midriff. And she certainly never goes without a bra. I can totally see her nipples. It's like they're fighting to burst through the fabric. And as for the white shorts, well, she's worn those before, but only for sports activities. Together with the shirt, she looks so casual. Mom. Casual. And no bra. Calm down. What's going on here? There must be a good explanation. He cleared his throat and said, Hey, Mom. His voice picked a bad time to crack, as it still did every now and then. Are you off to play some sports or something? Susan's face was red. No, Tiger, it's too late at night for that. You're wondering about my clothing, I guess. Suzanne is making me wear these crazy things. At the mention of Suzanne, Susan turned further around to face her best friend who was standing nearby. That set her breasts in motion again. They crashed into each other like two water balloons bouncing on independent journeys. The gentle friction from them moving against her T-shirt was rather disconcertingly new to her. Mom, Alan wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say. His penis was suddenly almost painfully erect. Should I say she's sexy? Hot. No, that would scare her. Yes, Tiger. Susan lowered her head shyly, causing more earthquakes of movement on her chest. The longer Alan delayed speaking, the redder her face became. She was particularly embarrassed over how erect her nipples had become. She prayed that it wasn't noticeable. Mom, you look young. He unconsciously heaved a big sigh of relief at finding a diplomatic word. More confidently, he continued, seriously. You could practically be a high-school student. Your other clothes make you look older, but this makes you look 10 years younger. He looked down at his crotch and noticed a huge bulge there. He quickly adjusted his shorts while Susan was looking down and away. Susan blushed even more furiously, but now she was pleasantly embarrassed at the compliment instead of apprehensive about his reaction. No. You're just saying that, son. No, really. It's true. Dang. If my friends saw you right now, they'd totally want to ask you out to the prom. But what's the special occasion? She smiled a big smile with her head still bowed. Why don't you ask Suzanne about it? It was her crazy idea. Would you like something to eat? I could make you some cookies. That would be great. Thanks a ton, Mom. He walked over to Suzanne after delighting in the sight of his mother turning and thus initiating another tit-quake on her chest. Susan was immensely pleased at his reaction. Her husband had never really complimented her, leaving her emotionally starved for praise. But at the same time, she was glad that Alan had seemingly diverted his attention to Suzanne. Alan's eyes had been focused on Susan's chest, but Susan was mostly thinking about her shorts. It was impossible for Alan to see that she wasn't wearing panties, but Susan could feel the difference very acutely. The shorts were so tight that they rubbed her crotch maddeningly. The unfamiliar feel of her boobs bouncing freely inside her shirt, and Alan's eyes boring into her combined to get her surprisingly aroused. She felt tingly all over, but most especially jolts of pleasure as her erect nipples constantly rubbed against the fabric of her shirt. That only increased her agitation and horniness, as she knew Alan would be able to see the shape of her nipples. She found herself getting wet, just standing in the kitchen and thinking of Alan looking at her. She blamed her moistness on the rubbing of the fabric, when in fact that was only a small part of the cause. She suddenly attacked the task of making oatmeal cookies with a passion, to take her mind off everything else. Alan meanwhile walked over to the dining room table where Suzanne was sitting, taking a chair across the table from her. The kitchen and dining room were essentially one room separated by a kitchen counter, so he could still hear and partially see Susan in the kitchen. He took a good look at his Aunt Susie for the first time since he'd walked in, and dropped his jaw in surprise. She was wearing a business-like dress shirt as she sometimes did, but it was unbuttoned and opened. Beneath it was something Alan mistakenly assumed to be a tight negligee. In fact, some daring people wore the combination out in public, but few let it ride as low as Suzanne was doing. It exposed her boobs more completely than he'd ever seen them. As he had walked over to her, she'd unobtrusively lowered the edge of her dress on her rack until the pink edges of her nipples were barely showing. Wow, Aunt Susie, you look really pretty today. Suzanne leaned forward. Alan's heart began to race. Why thank you, sweetie. You noticed I'm not wearing my usual dress. About the clothes your mom and I are wearing. She and I were talking earlier and decided that one way we could break you out of your funk was to make everything around here a bit sexier, so that you could get in more of a sexy mood. And that could help you get over your frustration from asking out Christine. Wow, thanks, you too. He was really touched, not to mention shocked. I can see they're really trying to help me out. But what a strange way to do it. I can hardly believe this is Mom and Aunt Susie we're talking about here. Suzanne asked him, how do you like my dress? Is it too much? Do you think it's too revealing? But just as she said the word, revealing, she flexed her muscles and stuck out her chest. The red dress slipped down an inch, entirely revealing both her nipples. He gasped aloud. His heart literally skipped a beat. No, he finally said. She could have had a giant red X painted on her face and he would never have known, because his eyes never left her chest. Oh, good, 'cause I was worried it's a little too loose on me. She leaned back in her chair, which caused the dress to ride up over her nipples again. She looked away so he would feel more uninhibited about checking her out. He assumed she simply didn't know how revealing her dress was, when in fact she knew exactly what she was doing and delighted in it. For the next few minutes while she talked to him, her nipples played a constant game of hide and seek. He felt like his stiff rod would punch a hole through his shorts at any moment. Nervous sweat even appeared on his forehead. Pushing her luck even further, Suzanne took off her white dress blouse, so all she had left was the precarious red dress. It immediately slipped down an inch or two, revealing both her nipples yet again. She seemed completely unaware of what she was showing. She looked into the kitchen as she talked to Susan, giving him free rein to gawk. His mouth gaped open and closed like a gasping fish, but eventually he got swept up into the conversation. Suzanne turned back towards him and stared intently into his face as she said something to him. He had no idea what it was. Forcing him to turn away and play it cool for a while. Then she turned away again. He sat there with his mouth hanging open like a drooling idiot. The whole while, her nipples and areolae were clearly on view from just a few feet away. He could practically count all the little bumps on them. Susan had her back turned, so she had no idea what was going on. But finally she said to Alan, "Tiger, can you help me here?" Alan was forced to get up and head to the kitchen. Suzanne relaxed, breaking into an unsuppressible, slight grin. But before he could walk away, she gave him a "come hither" gesture with her finger. As if piloted by remote control, he crossed to where she was sitting, fighting to keep his eyes on her face. Bvec she motioned him still closer and kept on until he bent forward so she could whisper directly into his ear. "Sweetie, you may have noticed your mother isn't wearing a bra. She isn't wearing any panties either, for that matter. She's trying to be sexy for you." Alan stood up. He felt like he'd been run over by a train, and more than once. Between his Aunt Susie sexily whispering with that huskily breathy voice of hers and her top hanging out again, plus the idea of his incredibly repressed mother going commando, he thought for sure he'd come right in his shorts. But he managed to hold out. Finally, he waddled to the kitchen somewhat like a penguin. He tried to prevent his erection from bouncing around wildly by putting a hand in his pocket to hold it. But that caused its own problems and delights. "I've looked all over, but I can't find the baking soda," his mother said to him. "Can you help?" Alan gasped again, because now she was bent over and sticking her head into a cabinet near the floor. Her ass was poking up high into the air, and Alan could see from the lack of lines in the fabric straining against her behind that Suzanne was right. His mother wasn't wearing any panties. He stared intently at the strip of fabric between her legs, trying to make out the dark shape of her bush as a bulging mound. With his hand still in his pocket and on his dick, he began playing pocket pool, masturbating slowly. He never consciously made the decision to do so, it was as if his hand had a mind of its own. "Tiger, did you hear me?" Susan asked again. Sure Mom," he said, but he stood frozen in place, staring and rubbing himself. He was too far gone to stop. He was right on the verge of making a big mess in his shorts. "Can I help?" It was Suzanne's voice. Alan turned and saw the sexy redhead now standing on the other side of the counter that divided the kitchen from the dining room. Her dress hung down a good inch below her nipples now and she still seemed unaware of that fact. She was playing with fire, standing like this so close to Susan, but she didn't intend to pull her dress up until Susan began standing up. Alan immediately stopped rubbing himself through his shorts, afraid she could see what he was doing. Susan answered, "Sure. Check around for the baking soda." She spoke into the cabinet as she was still bending over lewdly. She was oblivious to Suzanne's display and even the effect of her own accidental display of her fantastic legs and ass. Her main concern was to hide her erect nipples from Alan's eyes, and she figured she was doing that. Alan's mouth hung open as he stood there with both hands over his crotch, looking like he desperately had to pee. The 1.2 punch of seeing both his mother and Aunt Susie like this was too much for him. His knees began to buckle as he started to come into the front of his shorts. Suzanne asked knowingly, "Something wrong there, sweetie? You seem antsy." He stood there, mouth agape, while his cock spasmed visibly in his shorts. Suzanne saw it, despite his best efforts to cover it with his hands. He finally recovered enough to say, "Thanks for helping Mom, Aunt Susie, 'cause I just remembered something. I gotta go." He rushed off to his room in shame, never taking his hand out of his shorts or off his now wet dick. He couldn't, because his hand was covered with cum that had leaked into the pocket. Susan was still bent over, totally unaware of what had just transpired. Suzanne pulled her dress back up over her nipples and chuckled inwardly. "We were just too much for the poor guy. Now my plan is really kicking into gear. This is going to be so much fun." Alan had already climaxed twice earlier in the day. After what he'd seen in the kitchen, he had 3 more orgasms before he fell asleep. His long-standing rule not to masturbate about his mother or his Aunt Susie was left in tatters. Chapter 16 Alan Aunt Susie. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Suzanne's plans to sex things up was already showing results. The next morning, Alan found himself dreaming. In his dream, he came home from school to find both his mother and Aunt Susie waiting for him in the living room, wearing outrageously sexy outfits. They wore matching cocktail dresses showing off their long legs and impressive cleavage. Once Alan was sitting with them, Suzanne explained that she and Susan had decided not to beat about the bush. In order to help him with his 6x day treatment, they decided to go all out and help him sexually in any way necessary. To prove it, they both disrobed and stood naked before him, holding hands for mutual support. Events in Alan's dream escalated rapidly from there, because he decided he needed a lot of help coming, starting right away. Eventually he had them in a fuck sandwich, with Susan lying on top of Suzanne, while he stood above them stroking his erection and trying to decide which one to fuck first. But before he could choose, he woke up. At first, he was just frustrated. Dang! What a lousy time to wake up. If only I could have had 5 more minutes of that wonderful dream. Hell, just 2 more minutes and I would have been inside one of them. Damn it, I want to fuck somebody. But then what he'd dreamt about hit him. Whoa. Hold on here. Mom and Aunt Susie are off limits. I've been having too many sexual dreams about them lately, but dreaming about fucking them both crosses the line. God knows they're impossibly sexy, but they're family. Okay, technically Aunt Susie isn't really my aunt, but in my heart she is and that's what matters. But how can I not have wet dreams about them? I mean, after what happened yesterday. The way they dressed and everything. It's crazy. I'm only human. Besides, I need this kind of inspiration. Having to come 6 times a day is almost impossible. Okay, maybe in reality they're not going no holds.barred in helping me, but I've got to at least go no holds.barred in my fantasies if I can even hope to keep up the pace. And that starts right now, because I've still got a nice boner. Ah. Now, where were we? Keeping his eyes closed, he began stroking himself, trying to get back into his dream and continue his fantasy. It didn't work fully, but he was able to recapture enough of the sexy vibe to have a nice come before getting out of bed to start his day. Alan thought that it couldn't get any better. However, Suzanne was just getting started. Later in the day, she decided to wear a very revealing blue summer dress when over at the Plummer house. She loved blue because it complemented the highlights in her reddish-brown hair. Even though it was almost October, in Southern California the weather was always warm, and this happened to be the middle of a very hot heat wave. Suzanne's shoulder straps widened as they went down to partially cover her big tits, but they didn't cover much else. The dress hung fairly loosely, so that she could expose her nipples just by pushing into the sides of her boobs with her upper arms. When she walked, her firm globes jiggled and threatened to fall out the sides of the dress altogether. The fabric extended only a few inches below her crotch. Soon, Alan would be home from school. Suzanne had a trick up her sleeve to push her sexual teasing of him a lot further. Susan, being so conservative and religious, had always made sure that Alan had a porn filter on his computer, which was in his room. But in light of Alan's medical diagnosis and with some prodding from Suzanne, Susan had decided that he needed to have the porn filter removed. So that day, Suzanne uninstalled the filter program before he got home. Like a cat waiting to pounce, Suzanne waited for him to get home and head to his room to masturbate. She lurked outside his door a few minutes after she heard him close his drapes to darken the room, then waited a few more minutes until she figured he was masturbating with gusto. Then she knocked on his door. "Sweetie, you in there? It's me, your Aunt Susie. Can I come in?" Alan thought this request was unusual, as she rarely came into his room. Especially lately. Everyone had been giving him all the privacy he needed. He figured it must be something important. Yeah, just a minute." He quickly threw on some shorts, raced to his computer, and turned on the lamp next to it. He turned on the monitor and the computer came back to life from sleep mode. "Come in," he said, trying to act like he had been working on the computer the whole time. "Hi sweetie, how are you doing in here?" Suzanne asked as she strolled into the room and looked around. "Are you hiding from the heat?" The heavy drapes were closed, so that the only light in the darkened room, other than from his computer screen, came from his table lamp. He didn't answer, since he was too nervous to come up with a quick response. He hadn't seen her yet, but he had a strong suspicion that she'd be wearing something extremely sexy. She continued, "Sorry to disturb you, but I was thinking about you probably sulking up here in your room, and I thought I'd come in and try to cheer you up. Is that okay?" "Sure, it's okay," he said as he turned around and finally got a good look at her and the light blue dress she was wearing. Whoa. Holy. Wow. I've seen Aunt Susie in some revealing clothes before, but nothing like this. Oh my God, her tits are hanging out everywhere. And her cleavage. Dang. On top of that, I think I can see the shape of her nipples through her dress from all the way over here. I really think I can. This is like what Mom wore yesterday, but 10 times better." Alan had spent most of the day at school fantasizing about his mother and Aunt Susie, but reality made his dreams seem like a cheap, pale fraud. Just the arousing smell of her perfume was enough to make him dizzy. His penis was suddenly fully erect. Suzanne walked to him and leaned over, on the pretense of seeing what he was doing on the computer. She pressed one of her breasts into his shoulder as she drew nearer to the screen. That was completely unusual too. He looked back over his shoulder in an attempt to look at her face, but his eyes fixed on her other breast instead. He realized, that loose hanging dress lets me not only see an entirely naked breast, but I can see clear down to her waist as well. I'm actually seeing an entire boob here. A giant, pale, Aunt Susie boob, no less. He just gawked dumbly at her pale breast until she said, "Mind if I have a seat?" Sure." Suzanne grabbed a chair and pulled it up next to him. "What are you working on there, sweetie?" "Surfing the web." "Yeah." He turned towards the screen, but it was the image of her mammoth boobs that burned deeply into his brain. She leaned forward. "What page are you reading?" "I have a hard time reading a computer screen without my glasses." "Glasses," he said, "I didn't know you wore glasses." "I don't usually. Only when I have something hard to read." Not only did she not need reading glasses, she didn't even own any. But it was a good excuse for her to put her face really close to the computer screen. That again caused the front of her dress to open out, revealing all of her huge breasts once more. Suzanne was sitting next to Alan, and his chair was pulled up under the desk and close to the computer screen, making it awkward for him to look over towards her. But he quickly realized that in the dark room he could see her boobs perfectly in the reflection on the screen, due to the desk lamp illuminating her. He pondered, For some reason, Aunt Susie seems to be completely unaware of what she's showing. Maybe it has to do with her eyesight. He had such a perfect view of her breasts through the screen's reflection that he couldn't believe it. Thank the Lord for summer dresses and this Indian summer heat wave. Until recently, he had tried his very best not to think about his Aunt Susie in a sexual way. It was extremely difficult because everything about her oozed sexuality. But he had long ago come to feel as if she were in fact his second mother, so he had a policy never to masturbate about her, just as he never allowed himself to masturbate about his mother or sister. Usually that even extended to Suzanne's daughter Amy next door, whom he thought of as another sister. But lately, his resolve about them was failing. His mind was filled with nothing but lusty thoughts and fantasies about his aunt as he stared into the reflection on the computer screen. The fragrance of her sweet perfume was also fogging his brain. She smelled vaguely like vanilla. His dick grew so hard that it popped through the fly of his quickly donned shorts. He was really kicking himself now for rushing so much that he had failed to put on underwear as well. Both his hands were on the keyboard, so he couldn't figure out how he could casually stuff his erection back into his pants without drawing attention to his problem. Then he realized that if he just scooted forward a bit more, he could leave his dick out and it would be too far under the desk for Suzanne to possibly see. He decided that was the best solution. He happened to have his browser open to a news article. He liked keeping up on the news. Interesting article, said Suzanne, as she read it. She figured she'd give him as much time as he wanted to ogle her tits. He stared at the reflection of her tits for long minutes. He remained excited, but his pounding heart calmed somewhat, so at least he didn't feel like he was on the verge of a heart attack. She was so close beside him that he could feel her sweet, minty breath on his arm. After she appeared to have finished the article, she cleared her throat, causing Alan to twist around in his seat to make eye contact with her. The reason I came in here is that I was thinking there was something that could cheer you up. I know you've been falling behind on doing your thing lately, so your mom decided it would be okay to remove the porn filter from your computer, as one way to help inspire you. I took the program off while you were at school, and I wanted to show you the kinds of things that you now can see on your computer. Whoa! He was really surprised at this turn of events. Where is she going with this? As you probably know, she continued, I don't get a lot of romance from my husband. I hate to admit it, but one way I compensate is by looking at internet porn. There's a lot of crap out there, but I have some sites I've found that are really good and I wanted to show them to you, now that you can access them from your computer. Is that okay? Sure. He, rightfully, found it hard to believe that a perfect centerfold like Suzanne would ever need to look at internet porn to get her sexual fun. But he wasn't about to try to stop her. Suzanne grabbed the mouse and began clicking. Yesterday, you wouldn't have been able to check out this site, but I talked to your mom about it and today. Voila! The DSL connection allowed a bunch of pictures to pop up instantly. Suzanne had spent recent days finding the best pictures she could find, and she began going through them. She actually had put them all onto a web page she just created. Can I just bookmark this page? That way you can find them later. He was still too stunned to speak, so he just nodded. She had some pictures of beautiful naked women that filled the screen. She'd especially tried to find pictures that at least somewhat resembled her. A large percentage had dark reddish-brown hair and green eyes, just as she did. Alabaster skin was another common theme. As she went through them, Alan felt a sense of pure exhilaration. The feeling of his dick resting in the open air, yet hidden from Suzanne who was sitting right next to him, was almost more than he could handle. She came to one picture that was nothing but two enormous tits. By happy coincidence, the size and location of the tits roughly fit the image of her own tits shown in the reflection on the monitor screen. They too were hanging out of a very openly revealing dress, in the same way hers were at that very moment. He gasped out loud, thinking, if she only knew. My heart is beating so fast. Can a teenager die from overtaxing his heart? Seriously. In fact, she knew. She'd had the reflection and everything else planned out in advance. But she didn't let on what she knew, especially that she knew his erection was hanging out beneath the desk. You like that one, eh? As a matter of fact, I like that one too. Of course I like men, but I must admit looking at a sexy woman turns me on just as much. That's why I'm showing you my favorite pictures of women. I thought you'd like them just a bit more than my favorite pictures of men, right? She nudged his shoulder with her own and they both laughed. She remained near him afterwards, her arm resting against his while the heat from her body warmed his own. Alan was so nervous that he laughed far too loud and long. She continued, nothing beats looking at a pair of round, firm, big bare breasts, don't you think? There's just something about them. Even as a woman, I find them strangely captivating. He nodded. He was so excited, he could hardly breathe. Suddenly she got serious, and turned to look him in the face with a very concerned look. You don't think there's something wrong with me if I get horny looking at women, do you? Oh, no. No. That's okay. At least being asked easy questions was giving him a chance to regain his voice. You don't think it's wrong if sometimes I want to rub my hands all over a woman's boobs, and even lick her pussy? Does that make me a lesbian? In actual fact, she wasn't just acting. She really did find herself attracted to women, and had even had a few girlfriends in college, her roommate in particular. But she hadn't done that kind of thing in years, for fear of social scandal in a neighborhood where tongues wagged. No, no, said an increasingly incoherent Alan. I've hardly ever heard her even speak a curse word, and now she's talking like this. Thanks. She put her arm around him and patted him on his opposite shoulder. Then she left her hand there. I don't think it does either, especially if you knew how much I love having a real penis inside me. Even just holding one or sucking on a fat boner is such a hoot. But then again, I love kissing a soft pair of female lips while hefting the woman's big breasts in my hands. I guess that makes me bisexual. Do you mind? That I'm bisexual? He was suddenly very conscious of how close she was to him, enveloping him with her leg pressed against his, her arm holding him, and her side and tip pressed against his bare torso. He kept smelling her fragrant perfume and feeling her fingers moving slightly on his shoulder. His heart was beating even more irregularly, and he was perspiring heavily. Alan. Sweetie. He was so flustered he'd forgotten the question. Don't worry, she continued, going down on a woman, sticking my tongue deep into her pussy and rubbing my hands all over a pair of big hooters is, of course, a lot of fun. Yes. Don't be surprised. I've made love to women many times. I've fingered pussies and licked them. But I still think nothing beats a good, hard cock. So please don't be calling Aunt Susie a carpet muncher anytime soon, okay? But I have to admit that a naked woman is more beautiful than a naked man. Don't you agree? He was still so blown away by what she just said that he was incapable of speech. Suzanne plowed on. So I just love these pictures. It looks like we have similar tastes in women, don't you think? We obviously both like big D cups like your sister's, and even bigger G cups such as your mother's. Bigger than that, I don't know. I say there's too much of a good thing sometimes. Yeah. Aunt Susie, I'm so surprised to hear you speaking so. Frankly, he replied shakily. If she doesn't stop with all this sexy bisexual talk, I'm gonna pass out for sure. And I'm gonna come under this desk even sooner than that. Oh, don't mind me. I'm just trying to help you with your problem. Remember what I said about trying to sex things up a bit? Just like these pictures. Now that I see how much you like them, this is something we can do together more often. I'll show you more of the pictures I like, and you can show me the favorites you find, too. Okay. We can be hot together looking at the same women. Right. He somehow managed a nod. There are some great stories on the web too, that I can show you later as well. They're really hot. Before long you won't have any trouble doing your thing. Is it a deal? One of her hands was still on his shoulder, but she took her other hand off the mouse and held it out in front of him, implying that she wanted him to shake it. He shook her hand, more by automatic reflex than anything else. His mind was completely blown away. Deal? She asked again. He finally responded, deal. They shook hands firmly, which caused her large melons to jiggle enticingly, making one of them slide directly against his arm. Suzanne began to get up. I gotta run, but maybe we can do more of this later tonight, okay? She stood and walked to the door. She glanced at his daily count chart which she had retrieved from the trash the day Alan had discarded it. She had returned it to its position that morning, after she and Susan had heard him break his week-long funk the night before. She smiled to herself at his count so far that day, then turned and blew him a kiss before she walked out the door. Shucks, she thought, I didn't get a chance to do half the things I'd planned to do with this dress, but I guess I've gotta take it slow. There's no doubt he was right on the verge. Not only of orgasm, but of a heart attack. Ha! So much fun. I love my cute, innocent little sweetie so much. Immediately after she walked out the door, Alan put his hand on his exposed boner under the desk. As soon as he touched it, he blew a large load of cum into the wooden paneling of the back of the desk. He'd almost never masturbated anywhere other than his bed before, and always cleanly into a towel or tissues. Aghast, he looked under the desk and saw his cum dripping slowly down the wood and onto the carpet. He immediately jumped up and went to grab a towel. Gross. But what a mind-blowing experience. I've never felt anything like that before. Not even with a commie when she put her hands around my dick. And I did that thinking of Aunt Susie. My Aunt Susie. What's wrong with me? Why does she have to be a totally busted bisexual vixen? It's almost cruel. Look but don't touch. Ugh. He stayed in his room, lying on his bed. He came 3 more times that afternoon, just thinking about his experience with Suzanne. For a guy completely inexperienced in all matters sexual, what she'd done and said seemed far beyond the realm of possibility. She's never looked like that, talked dirty like that, or acted like that before. What's going on? Is she coming on to me? Oh my God. What if she actually wants to kiss me? What would I do? Was it just the heat wave that had her dressed like that? She and Mom talked about being a bit sexier, but this is just beyond belief. Get a grip, Alan. She's married. She's twice your age. She's way out of your league. She's like some Playboy centerfold, except even more busty and curvy. No way would she want to kiss you or anything like that. She's just sexing things up, like she said. But I don't think she realizes how good at it she is. Jesus H. Christ. That's like deadly lethal sexiness. I couldn't take that again, I just wouldn't be able to handle it. Eventually he got up to leave, but couldn't resist turning on the computer again and looking at the picture of the tremendous boobs that had so closely matched Suzanne's reflection. Just a short glimpse caused him to come yet again, relatively quickly. He'd been 1.4.6 that day until she came into his room. Hey, I'm gonna set an all-time record before I go to sleep tonight. Oh my God. She said she wanted to come back later tonight to look at more pictures. Chapter 17 Mom's Maid Outfit. Amy, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Alan took a nap. Then, at about 5 o'clock, he came out of his room and into the kitchen to get a drink. Howdy, Tiger. Did Suzanne help you out with the computer? Alan heard his mother speaking, but didn't see her. Then he looked down and saw that she was scrubbing the dining room floor. He suddenly got panicky. Oh no! What does she know about what Aunt Susie did in my room? But then, relaxing, he thought, of course Mom must know that Aunt Susie was removing the porn filter, she must be referring to that. She sure did, Mom. Thanks for allowing her to remove the filter. I think that'll really help me with my problem. Way better than those porn magazines. I don't think I'll have any problem doing my thing today, that's for sure. He decided not to mention how looking at the real Suzanne turned him on much more than any pictures. That's good, Susan said out loud, but inwardly she worried. Suzanne went into his room dressed pretty skimpily and she's a very attractive woman. I don't know about that. It seems a little bit dangerous. God, what if he masturbates thinking about her? Or me? Did I go too far with that shirt last night? It's much better that he thinks about her, if he has to think about anyone. I should thank her later. Tiger looks like he's been reborn, he's totally over his blue mood. Alan walked around the counter and took a closer look at his mother. She was wearing a dress and an apron. No way. She isn't wearing any panties. His thoughts screamed through his brain as his dick, although weary from masturbating so many times, instantly sprang to life. Susan's ass was wiggling high in the air as her whole body rocked back and forth to the rhythm of her scrubbing at a particularly troublesome spot on the floor, which in turn set her large dangling breasts swaying in counterpoint to her rocking motion. Her short skirt left most of her ass exposed. An ass completely unencumbered by panties. Her display was entirely unintentional. She'd made 2 promises to Suzanne. 1, to go without underwear for a few days, and 2, to wear this maid outfit for the day. Having worn panties her whole life and being unused to such short skirts, showing off her pussy or bare ass was a completely unfamiliar experience to her. She had been very conscious and concerned about it when she put the outfit on nearly an hour before, but she'd gotten into her habitual cleaning and had completely forgotten about what she might be showing. Alan's jaw dropped and his mouth gaped open. He caught a glimpse of her pussy between her legs, the first serious view of a real pussy he'd seen in his life. That just got his heart racing all the more. He immediately adjusted his suddenly erect penis in his pants to make its hardness less obvious. He walked around to stand in front of his mother and make idle chit-chat. But really he went there so he could see her bra-free tits swing back and forth like 2 steadily rocking pendulums. They were still contained in the dress, but he was pleased to see that it was an extremely low-cut one. He didn't know whether to laugh with joy, or cry in frustration about forbidden fruit. "Hi, Mom," he finally said to her. "Oh. Hi, Tiger." She looked up at him and smiled. He stood there watching her big boobs dangling and swaying while barely contained in her low-cut maid outfit. It was so arousing that he could scarcely believe his good luck. But after an increasingly awkward pause, he couldn't help but ask, "What's with the funny maid outfit?" Susan blanched, because his comment reminded her of what an outrageously revealing outfit she was wearing. "Oh. That." She suddenly stood up, like she just sat on a hot stove. Her eyes were wide with alarm and embarrassment, and she reflexively covered her breasts and crotch, even though her maid outfit already covered all her privates when she was standing, although just barely. He was disappointed that he'd said something that caused her to cover up, but it was too late to undo it. She turned her blushing face away as she said, "Isn't it silly? I made a bet with Suzanne and I lost the bet. I had to do anything she said, and this is what she chose. That I wear this for the day." What was the bet about? Susan had been teased by Suzanne about how she'd looked at Alan's erection during the doctor's office visit. She'd adamantly denied that she'd looked at it at all, but Suzanne knew that she had, so it was an easy bet for Suzanne to make and win. Suzanne had threatened to make a phone call to a commie to confirm it, which caused Susan to concede before Suzanne could dial the number. Naturally, thinking about the bet caused Susan to get even more flustered. That's not important. What really rankles me is that she's trying to get me to wear all kinds of crazy things all of a sudden. But I feel like a dork. Don't you think it makes me look dorky? I don't know. Let me see. He walked all around her, especially taking time to look at her shapely ass again. Because she had a hand pulling her skirt down over her pussy, there was less tension on the backside of her skirt and he could see the bottom third of her ass cheeks without any covering at all. He would have been able to see between her legs to her pussy except that her legs were firmly pinched close together. He gasped. His mother dressed so conservatively all the time that he had never even seen her in anything as revealing as a bikini. To see some of her bare ass, especially up this close, was almost beyond imagining. Still not realizing what she was showing off in back, she asked, "What?" That stirred him to answer. "No way. Not dorky. Damn. Nobody with an ass like that could ever be called dorky. What's happening here? It's like I'm in the Twilight Zone all of a sudden. The Land of No Underwear episode. Is Aunt Susie behind this?" He walked back to her front side before she caught on that her ass was partially uncovered, adding, "I definitely like it. It's very classy. Definitely super undorky. Dorky, I tell you." But Susan smiled at the compliment. She added, "But what irks me even more is how demeaning it is. It's like I'm some kind of servant or slave or something. It's ridiculous. Can you just imagine me as some kind of maid servant, forced to obey every order given to me? I'm appalled. And I'm gonna get Suzanne back for this, I'll tell you that much." She continued to stand there, rather awkwardly covering her privates. He thought, dang. I could imagine Mom as a maid. My maid, obeying my every wish. Or better yet, a servant or slave. A sex slave. Damn. He imagined himself saying, "Mom, bend over again. Here comes your master's staff." Then he imagined her replying, "Yes, tiger. As you wish. Take me doggy style. Arg. Too arousing. I have to get out of here." Alan reluctantly left the room, realizing that if he stayed longer she'd get wise to what she was showing and then get upset at him for looking. Needless to say, he rushed to his room to masturbate yet again. Not surprisingly, he fantasized about her in that maid outfit. But he wasn't done. After he masturbated, he sat in his room, fidgeting restlessly. "I can't believe what just happened. I just masturbated to thoughts of Mom. Gross. But how can I help it? She's a woman. A good-looking woman. No, a great-looking woman. God, she's so damn hot. And for all I know, even as I sit here, she's in the living room in that insanely arousing maid costume bending over in some obscene position like I saw her in before. Showing off her bare ass. Or those giant swinging tits. Oh man. Just thinking about it, I'm getting hard as a steel bar. I can't stand it. What can I do, I'm only human. Is this what they meant by helping me? That can't be. Mom would never agree to that, not in a million years. I'm still waiting for her latest lecture about sex and sin. Maybe Aunt Susie told her to lay off on the moralizing as it would interfere with my medical cure. Maybe. I can hope. He stood up and began to pace back and forth across his room. Eric. This is killing me. What is Mom doing right now? It's been 30 minutes or so since I was down there. Is she still there dressed like that? I mean, it's not like there's something wrong in just going out and checking to see what she's wearing. But she's my mom. Eric. Damn it. Okay, just one quick look. He quietly opened his door and hurried downstairs to the living room. To his considerable delight and simultaneous tortured horror, he discovered her still in the maid outfit, cleaning windows. The house had high windows, so she had to stand on her toes and reach high to get to the top of them. Each time she did, her entire ass came into view. He could even see the pink of her pussy lips in between her ass cheeks, although her legs were relatively close together. He thought his brain would split in two. Okay. I'm an Eagle Scout, and now I'm also an Explorer Scout. I'm a role model, I have to do the right thing. I have to tell her what she's showing, and not just gawk. She's my mother, for Christ's sake. But on the other hand, I don't have to tell her right away, do I? I'm so painfully hard. This is helping me. I won't have trouble getting inspired to masturbate for days. Years, in fact. Oh man. Her ass cheeks. So firm. No flab at all. They keep shifting back and forth, like she's doing a sexy walk. The desire to just put my hand right there. He lurched forward a step or two. No. And why the hell is she dressed like this anyway? If she spreads her legs at all, I might even be able to see her. Right between. No. Don't even go there, man. Don't even go there. He noisily made his way towards her and said as casually as possible, "Hey mom. Still wearing that funny outfit?" Dorky, more like. She was still unaware of her exposed ass, and was in her usual good spirits. "Mom, I'm dying here. Dying of curiosity. What on earth did you bet with Aunt Susie that made you wear that?" Susan turned around to face him and began to blush deeply. Then she turned away again, which happily brought her partly exposed ass back into his view. "Oh, nothing. Nothing important. Man alive." The mystery deepens. I wish she'd spread her legs a bit though, like they were earlier. I can't see anything between them. What am I saying? She's my mother. Just then, Alan heard a door open. He saw that it was Amy, whom he and Catherine often called Ames in private, including in their thoughts. Aha! My savior. I can get her alone, and have her tell Mom to change clothing. Then Mom won't be embarrassed that I saw. Ames is very dependable and won't give me a hard time about it. Perfect. Hey, Alan. Amy said in her usual upbeat style. Hey, Ames. Can I ask you a favor? Okay. Sure. What's up? Alan thought, Amy rocks. She's always so kind and helpful, she'll help me out for sure. And she's a total hottie too, just like her mother. So Alan quietly told Amy what to do, and Amy got Susan to be more mindful about what she was showing without letting Susan know that Alan had prompted it. Susan was horrified to have to be given such a reminder. She immediately changed into less revealing clothes. Later, she wondered repeatedly whether Alan had seen anything, and if so, what, but she was too shy and embarrassed to ask or even bring it up. She was surprised to discover that she didn't really mind that much if he had seen her naked ass. In fact, in her heart of hearts she wondered if it was really an accident that she was doing so many tasks that showed off her ass when she knew she'd be putting on quite a display. Alan found he had no choice but to hurry back to his room and masturbate yet again. As he lay in bed afterwards, he thought about Amy, since her appearance earlier put her in his mind. You know, if I need a girlfriend, why not Amy? Good ol' Ames. I mean, she's a total hottie, there's no doubt about that. How could any daughter of Aunt Susie not be? She's one of the 4 or 5 most beautiful girls in school, there's no doubt. And she's just awesome all around. We're like, best buds. No, closer. We're like siblings. Hell, we are siblings, almost. I mean, we've been hanging together since birth, although we haven't been so close since we became teens and started doing our separate guy stuff and girl stuff. But that's the problem. We're more like siblings than potential lovers. I just don't think of her that way. Although she is totally, well, able, to be frank. But as a girlfriend, long-term. Sure, I'd grow to enjoy the sex pretty darn quickly, if only because she's got such a great, busty body. But I don't think we'd really click, overall. I mean, it would be weird. She's just Ames. And I don't mean to be rude, but the truth is, she's kind of an airhead. I totally love her, in a certain kind of way, but we don't click on an intellectual level. Besides, and here's the most important question. Do I even want a girlfriend? A few days ago I would have said, of course, but now all kinds of exciting things are happening with Aunt Susie and even with Mom. If I announced that I had a girlfriend, wouldn't those things stop? I probably should just roll with the punches and see what happens here. Chapter 18 Catherine's Diary. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. After dinner, Suzanne came over once more while wearing a new dress, if one could call it that. Her lower extremities were covered well enough, but the 2 strips of orange cloth that crossed each other over her breasts and again in the back left little to the imagination. Catherine sat with them in the living room and they all played cards, which they sometimes did after dinner. Catherine was a bit taken aback by the clothing of the 2 women, especially Suzanne's dress. Suzanne often raised her arms, yawning frequently or at least pretending to. It seemed obvious to Catherine that such movements were intended specifically to excite Alan. Catherine thought to herself, brother's totally checking out Aunt Susie. He's spellbound by the view of her boobs. It almost seems as if Mom isn't wearing a bra either, but that can't be. Can it? Although Catherine had always seemed to be a prudish, shy girl, she was so flummoxed by the strange situation that she just had to say something. Hey, Aunt Susie. That dress of yours. It's very, sexy. Suzanne suggested helpfully. She casually struck a provocative pose, with her arms behind her head. At the same time, she looked right at Alan with an almost pleading expression on her face. Susan looked toward Alan with worry. She felt this whole situation was very improper. Yeah, very sexy, Catherine replied. She felt flummoxed by how aroused Suzanne's curvaceous body was making her feel, especially in that pose. Suzanne dropped her arms and smiled at Catherine. Oh, thank you. You noticed. You're probably wondering why I'm wearing it. As you know, Sweetie has been completely down in the dumps for almost a week. And he's totally fallen off his schedule. That was another euphemism, referring to his chart of the number of times he got sexual relief in a day while avoiding speaking about it so bluntly. Suzanne continued, so your mother and I decided that if we made things around here a little bit sexier, we could break him out of his depression over Christine, and at the same time get his libido going again. Today's our first full day of motivating him this way. According to him, it appears to be working. Look how much happier he is already. Sweetie, do you think this dress is sexy? Everyone looked at Alan. Susan was frowning with worry. There was no doubt Alan was smiling and happy, if a bit in awe. He was practically struck stupid by Suzanne's sexiness, so much so that he was losing badly at their card game. Yeah, was all he could manage. Suzanne continued, if you feel comfortable doing it, you can also dress a bit more sexily, Angel. The more the merrier. Right, sweetie. Okay. Catherine answered before Alan could, and before Susan could object. She loved having an excuse to dress in a revealing way for her brother, especially since she'd started doing that already. Susan quickly interjected, the emphasis there is on a bit. Let's not overdo this, okay? Everything in moderation. Isn't your dress a little too much, Suzanne? I mean, really. Suzanne stated forcefully, no, it's not. We have to go all out to help him. And that includes Angel. She definitely can help inspire him. Susan sighed. I suppose, if you think so. She looked to her daughter with worry. But only in this house, is that clear, Angel? I feel horrible just thinking about some strange man looking at my daughter with lust in his eyes. Catherine giggled happily. Sure. What a great idea. Of course I'll help out. Anything for my number one brother. Hey, I'm your only brother, said Alan. That's why you're my number one brother, she joked. Then she added, to mollify her mother, and of course I'll only dress inspirationally in the house, or the backyard. I don't want some pervy guy looking at me with lust in his eyes either. Susan exhaled with relief. Thank goodness for that. Then Catherine added with a cheeky wink, unless it's my brother, of course. No more was said of such things that evening. Susan was distraught by this kind of teasing from Catherine, with the prospect of more in the future. She was tempted to lecture her children in private, but she didn't know what she could say, since she had accepted that Alan needed a lot of help with visual stimulation. Besides, Suzanne seemed confident that everything was fine, which reassured her somewhat. Later, Catherine sat down at her desk. She pulled out a locked diary from a secret spot in the back of a drawer, took out a key from a hook she'd hung behind a painting done by Amy, and unlocked it. She'd been recording her thoughts in her diary for years, but kept its existence private. She'd never even told her best friend Amy about it because that was where she recorded her ultra-secret incestuous feelings for her brother. She wrote, "Dear Diary, it looks like Aunt Susie has the same kind of thoughts that I've been having. Sexing things up. That's good. That gives me the green light to step things up some more. But what's her motive? Is it just trying to help out brother, or does she want him too? If she does, she doesn't have the whole incest problem to deal with like I do, plus she's like 1,000 times sexier than I am. I can't compete. But on the other hand, if she keeps pushing, maybe that could open doors for me too. Maybe we could all help him out. It's probably my only serious chance to turn my dreams into reality. I'm not that good at talking Mom into stuff, but Aunt Susie can talk her into doing just about anything. She's amazing, and she knows it. Damn." Suzanne did not in fact visit Alan's room again that evening. She decided, I'll have to pace myself more if I don't want Susan to get suspicious or mad. Making her wear that maid outfit was really pushing my luck. If I get caught naked with Sweetie straight on the heels of that, I'll be in big trouble. Best let things cool down a bit for a few days. All in all, my plan to seduce him is working like a charm. All I need is patience. Chapter 19, Victoria's Secret. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Susan and Suzanne met regularly each morning after their kids left for school. With a lot of free time on their hands, they worked diligently to keep their bodies in peak condition. They worked out in private in Susan's basement because they were tired of all the gawking at their perfect bodies, from both men and women, whenever one or both of them went to a public gym. They had split the cost and bought an entire range of professional level exercise machines. They also used their morning workouts as an opportunity to socialize with each other. Susan was very anxious, because she told Suzanne just about anything of any importance that happened to her, and now there was something she didn't want to talk about at all. But she was compelled to. It was as if talking to her best friend was her religious confessional. While they were just standing around, about to do their stretching exercises, she said, "Last night, I had, a pretty weird dream." "Oh." Suzanne raised a curious eyebrow. "What happened?" They talked about dreams fairly frequently, since they talked to each other extensively each morning. Susan looked down, feeling very shy. I don't know if I want to talk about it." Her closest friend said with some irritation, "Come on. You can't say that after bringing it up." Susan's face turned red. But. It's really personal. It's so shameful. Let me guess. You had dreams of a sexual nature involving Sweetie." Susan looked up and gasped. "Oh my. My goodness. How did you know?" "Elementary. Dreams are a way of processing what happens to us during the day. You wore a sexy French maid outfit yesterday to help his visual stimulation, so I'll bet dollars to donuts that you had dreams about that. It's only natural. Susan whispered, as if confessing a murder, I did. I did. Oh God. It was horrible. Tell me what happened. Susan buried her face in her hands. I can't. It's all too scandalous and awful. Suzanne said calmly, look. Dreams are dreams. They're no reflection on your morality. If you go see a horror movie featuring a big one-eyed green monster, it's almost inevitable that you'll dream of a big one-eyed green monster attacking you. That's just human nature and it doesn't say anything about you or your morality. So tell me about the sexy dream about you and Alan. I may be able to provide some insight on it. Very well. Susan sat down in a nearby chair. She spoke while keeping her eyes tightly shut. I dreamed I was wearing a sexy French-maid outfit. In fact, it was basically the exact same one I wore yesterday. Except that. Well. I was shameless. Tiger was in the room, and instead of covering up, I showed him, well. Everything. All my naughty places. She buried her face in her hands again. There was a pause during which it seemed as if she was about to cry, but then she went on, I bent and stretched and carried on like some kind of wanton hussy. I was sinful and terrible. I even let him touch me. Suzanne was intrigued, and secretly very pleased. Really? Where? His shorts were pulled down, and I could see. His thing. His member. Oh, Suzanne. Suzanne rushed over and gave Susan a comforting hug, just as Susan began to cry. It took quite a while for Suzanne to get the rest of the story out of Susan, but she eventually found out that Susan's dream was less about the maid outfit and more about Alan's penis. Susan had dreamt that she had stared at it from mere inches away, blown air on it, and even held it and stroked it. Obviously, this was heavily influenced by what she'd seen Akami do. Suzanne did her best to be consoling and tell Susan that such dreams were perfectly normal and didn't indicate any kind of incestuous feelings whatsoever. She even put forth a theory that the dreams were a way to expunge such inappropriate feelings so they wouldn't be a bother in daily life. Susan would have found that comforting except that she knew she was also thinking about Alan and his penis frequently during the day when she was awake. In fact, it seemed to her that she rarely thought of anything else anymore. What made it even worse was that this wasn't the first such erotic dream for her, she'd been having them almost every night, ever since the doctor's visit where she saw Akami stroke Alan's huge erection. The situation didn't improve at all that day, or night. Suzanne frequently showed her incredible body off to Alan, and made a lot of progress in getting Susan to do the same. Not surprisingly, Suzanne dressed more daringly than Susan did, but Susan was at least making an effort to sex things up to help her son reach his daily target. Catherine was also busy with her own plans to sex things up. Because of her long-standing secret desire for her brother, she could hardly believe she had a green light of sorts to act sexy around him too. She plotted just what she should do and when, analyzing how far she dared push things. For example, when Alan arrived home that afternoon, he'd been surprised to find Catherine standing in the living room wearing the sexiest and most revealing casual clothes he'd ever seen her wear. She had on a tight white top that left her midriff exposed, and an extremely short pair of blue shorts. It was a not-so-subtle imitation of what Susan had worn 2 nights earlier. Catherine, feeling his eyes upon her, asked shyly, "Hey bro. How do you like my clothes? I bought these things last year but could never wear them. Now Mom will finally let me." He thought, you know what? I don't think she's wearing a bra. Just like Mom and Aunt Susie. True, her boobs aren't wonders of the world like theirs are, but they're still plenty big enough to get my heart racing, and that's a fact. Especially since she's bouncing all over. I guess she's excited that she's allowed to wear these clothes. I dunno. Women. They're very nice, he admitted honestly. He joked, they're like from this century. She was very pleased and laughed heartily. She bounced around some more, breaking into some of her cheerleader routines. He left the room but realized he'd left his backpack behind and returned a minute later. He was surprised to find Catherine still there, but now standing still with her eyes closed and an intent look on her face. She had two hands down below her waist, and was making strange motions with them. He thought, if I didn't know better, it almost looks like her hands are making the motions of someone stroking a dick, but obviously it must be something else. He was too shy to ask her what she was doing, so he tried to leave the room unnoticed. She'd figured he would come back for his backpack and wanted him to discover her like that. When she heard him leave she thought, gotcha. He was so surprised at her behavior that about a minute later he had to go back to look at her again. She was still making the strange hand motions, but this time curiosity got the best of her and she looked up as he came in. She immediately stopped her hand motions and even put her hands behind her back in embarrassment. There was no hiding the fact that he'd seen her doing something, so he asked, "Hey sis, how's it going? What were you doing there?" "Oh, nothing," she said, acting flustered. "Nothing at all. I wasn't thinking about you, really." She gawked at his crotch. "It was, this other guy. Actually, I wasn't thinking of anybody. That reminds me, Mom asked me to go do something." She fled the room. That only amazed Alan even more. What the heck was that about? I mean, that totally looks like she was fantasizing about stroking a guy's penis. She acted so guilty, too. And was she staring at my shorts for a moment there? Dang, that was bizarre. I hope she didn't see my erection. Then he walked into the dining room and found Susan and Suzanne chatting and drinking coffee. His eyes went to his mother first. Susan wore a reddish-brown silk top that didn't particularly reveal her big breasts, but it left her midriff completely uncovered. That was pretty sexy by itself, because she had the firm abdominals of an athlete from her daily workouts with Suzanne, and also because even showing off her belly button was a very rare event. She wore shorts, shorter than any she'd worn around him before. In the back, the shorts reached only as far down as the fold of skin at the edge of her ass cheeks. He didn't recognize either item, which was because they were both Suzanne's clothes, which even Suzanne had never been bold enough to wear. When they saw him they both got up and bounded towards him. With all the bouncing that ensued, he knew that, again, neither of them was wearing a bra. They both hugged him at the same time, pressing into him from either side. He realized, I can feel 4 nipples pressing against me. All at once. Somehow I could believe this kind of thing coming from Aunt Susie, but it just doesn't seem possible that my mom would dress like this as well. I feel like I've entered the Twilight Zone. Someone wake me from this weird dream. I'm having totally unthinkable feelings about both of them. Constantly. He hadn't gotten a good look at Suzanne yet, but when the arousing hug ended he took the opportunity to scope out her outfit. She wore a red dress that impressively showed off her curvy body. Alan loved the red dress, as it matched the bright red highlights in her dark reddish-brown hair and went with her pale creamy skin so effectively. The dress put her cleavage on exceptionally fine display. "What do you think, sweetie?" Suzanne asked, knowing full well he was checking her out. VA. Voom. She stepped back and positioned herself like the famous scene of Marilyn Monroe standing above an air exhaust grate. Unfortunately there was no wind to blow her dress up, but the pose was a big hit with him just the same. She brushed a hand through her hair and stared at him with hungry eyes. She suddenly leaned forward, giving him a great chance to see her boobs hanging down dramatically inside her dress. He'd already been hard from seeing Catherine's revealing outfit and suggestive hand gestures, but now his dick seemed to become a rigid rod. Susan laughed happily but nervously, then said, "Our neighbor is so shameless, isn't she?" "Suzanne, you really go too far." She began walking towards the kitchen, saying, "Come on, Tiger, you must be thirsty. What would you like to drink?" As Susan poured Alan one of his favorite drinks, orange juice, Suzanne added, "I dressed your mother up in some of my clothes today, because all of hers are so totally square." Susan leaned back over the counter that separated the kitchen and dining room, playfully sticking her tongue out at Suzanne. In the process, she bent over and revealed to Alan nearly as much of her equally considerable cleavage as Suzanne had just done. The difference was, she didn't realize what she was showing, whereas Suzanne almost certainly had gauged the impact of every flirty move she made. Susan just had no clue that she was an incredibly gorgeous woman. Because she'd always worn conservative clothes, she was inexperienced at the art of revealing and teasing. But in a way, her innocence was even more arousing than Suzanne's deliberate posing. Suzanne continued, "Starting tomorrow, she and I are going shopping to get her some new clothes. She's been the fashion torchbearer for the Victorian era for far too long. I have a news flash. Victoria's Secret has nothing to do with Queen Victoria." Susan laughed, flicked her wrist, and said, "Oh, you. Like some silly schoolgirl." She giggled nervously, which was very atypical behavior for her. She was uncomfortable about the whole "sexing things up" policy. Soon the situation was back to normal, with the two of them again sitting at the dining room table. Alan made up an excuse to leave and went back to his room to beat off. After the unprecedented sexy display of the three women closest to him, he had no trouble at all getting quick relief. He tried to think of Suzanne, since she was the least forbidden fantasy object of the three, but he ended up thinking about all three of them. He felt guilty about that when his climax was over, but that guilt didn't stop him from thinking about all three of them the next time. And the time after that as well. He spent much of the evening in his room masturbating, or if he wasn't up for that, then thinking about all that he'd seen lately. He ended up climaxing 4 times. But most of all he was dying from anticipation, because of Suzanne's visit the night before. He expected her to come in and do a repeat scene at any moment. But he was disappointed. Susan had started complaining about the "sexing things up" plan, and it took a long time for Suzanne to overcome her objections. By the time that fire had been doused, it was too late for Suzanne to get time alone with Alan that evening. He ended the day one climax short of equaling his previous day's all-time record of 8, even without his hoped-for private inspiration from Suzanne. He was concerned, though, about whether what had happened had been a freak event. But he needn't have worried, Suzanne was very determined to give him much more assistance very soon. Chapter 20 Susan's Dream. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Late at night, Susan found herself dreaming. In the dream, she was wearing the same French-made outfit that she'd worn after losing the bet with Suzanne. She was cleaning the dining room table when Alan came in, dressed in his usual T-shirt and shorts, and sat down next to her. "Nice outfit," he said as he reached out with one hand and caressed her nearest butt cheek. Since in her dream Susan was wearing neither panties nor a bra, his fingers found nothing but firm yet somehow soft flesh there to explore. Within seconds, he had his fingers on her butt crack, sliding their way towards her anus. She whirled around and started to berate him angrily, "Alan Evan Plummer. Just what do you think?" But her voice died as she looked down and realized that he'd unzipped his fly and his erection was completely exposed. He said in a cocky tone, "Hey Mom, since you like to clean so much, try cleaning this." He raised his hard dot on, pointing it at her. She gasped. "I never." But she somehow found herself dropping to her knees in front of him. He let go of his boner and grasped her twin globes. Seconds later, he yanked her top down, leaving her huge breasts totally exposed. His hands moved in and started kneading her ample tit-flesh. "Wow, Mom, you really are stacked, you know that. I don't mean you just have big boobs, I mean you are seriously stacked. A porn star would kill for a pair like these. You're so fucking hot, I can't believe you're my mom." He was so cocky, he went to a nearby sofa and lay down on it, with his erection lewdly pointing up in the air, fully expecting his mother to follow. She chided him, "Now, Tiger, watch your language. But even as she said this, she crawled up on top of him until his hands were groping her exposed tits again. She didn't even bother to cover her chest, or protect her ass from his groping back there. Even so, she sounded upset as she complained with a stern look, "Son, how dare you treat me this way? Don't you know I'm your mother?" He grinned. "Of course I know that. Everyone in school says I'm the luckiest guy alive to have such a stacked, sexy mom." Her harsh tone softened a little. "Well, don't treat me like I'm just a pair of boobs." "Of course not, Mom. You're a stone-cold fox, from head to toe." He brought a hand down to fondle her still exposed ass to show he appreciated that part of her as well. She griped, "Son, you need to learn some manners. I suppose you're going to want me to stroke your, private parts next." His grin grew wider. "I certainly hope so. That would be nice." "Ha. Like that's ever going to happen." But whatever authority she had over him crumbled as he took one of her hands and guided it to his long shaft. As soon as her fingers were wrapped around it, he did the same to her other hand. Then, with all of her fingers curled around his thick pole, he went back to playing with her massive melons where they dangled above him. There was total silence while Susan stared intently at his stiffness. She was as surprised as she'd ever been when she saw her fingers start to slide up and down his needy boner. She couldn't think up any morally acceptable justification or excuse for what she was doing, so she just kept her mouth shut and her fingers sliding. In her dream, his dick was considerably bigger than in real life. It was 10 inches long, if not more, and much thicker as well. She couldn't even get her long fingers all the way around it as she stroked and stroked and stroked. She was growing so excited that she was panting hard, which made her heaving tits a bit of a moving target. However, Alan kept on caressing and exploring them, even pulling and twisting her nipples. Out of the blue, he resumed talking. "You know, Mom, wearing that outfit. That says you're not the leader around here, doesn't it? You're the maid, the servant. So the question is, who is in charge now?" She panted in a nearly inaudible whisper, "You are, son. You are." "I'm in charge of what?" "The house." "You." "Everything." She whispered, "Everything." He said confidently, "So that includes you." "That includes these." He gave each of her tits a firm squeeze, sinking his fingers deeply into the soft tit-flesh. "And this." He let go, only to bring his hands to her ass and squeeze her ass cheeks just as possessively. "And even this." He let go again, and brought one hand back to her tits while his other hand went to her pussy. She gasped as his fingers went right into her slit and started exploring. But far from pushing him away, her fingers slid up and down his stiffness with greater speed. He said, "Mom, if you want to be a good mom, you've got to help me. Help me come. You know I need to come 6 times each day. Be a good mom and make me come. Over and over. Starting right now." She panted, "I will. I will." Her fingers slid up and down his shaft, moving ever faster now that he was steadily leaking pre-cum. After a while she could feel his fingers on her clit as well as in her hot gash. That meant her big tits were unfettered, and they bounced about with wild abandon. She felt herself right on the brink of a great something. She'd never really experienced an orgasm before, but she suspected she was about to learn what one was like. Then, totally unexpectedly, Alan's penis started to shoot. Up until that moment, the dream had been within the bounds of realism, except for the exaggerated size of Alan's erection. But Alan kept on firing cum, more and more, until it was like the steady flow of a small nozzle high pressure hose. Generally, his cock was pointed at her, mostly at her tits and abdomen. But cum was flying everywhere, in simply impossible quantities. And as the cum hit her chest, her already large boobs grew even larger, as if his cum was some sort of miracle growth potion. Unlike a real male orgasm, Alan's climax didn't end after a few seconds, or even after an entire minute. And while Susan didn't have an orgasm per se, her arousal and euphoria kept rising and rising until she felt better than she'd ever felt before, both in real life and in her dreams. Her face, her hair, her legs, her entire body, all were covered in cum, which he kept blasting at her in a constant, never-ending stream. She felt extremely humiliated by all the cum. It was as if she were nothing but a cum receptacle for her son. But at the same time, she couldn't get enough. When his climax finally ended, she eagerly gobbled down all the cum her fingers could reach, sucking it into her mouth. Then she woke up. Susan was very distraught about the dream, and those feelings of upset wouldn't go away. Her kids spotted at breakfast that something was amiss, but she wouldn't tell them what was upsetting her. After the kids left for school, she quickly did what had become a daily check of their bedrooms for laundry. Ever since Alan's 6x day diagnosis, his sheets needed to be replaced almost daily. And that was in addition to the towels he used to masturbate into from the previous afternoon until that morning. He'd been using towels like that for a long time, and Susan had more or less gotten used to it. Somewhere in the back of her mind she'd been aware of what those wet stains must be and what they meant, but she hadn't allowed herself to think about it. She would just grab the towels without touching anywhere near the wet spots and then put them in the washing machine. It was a daily ritual that, like most such habits, could eventually be done with minimal thought. But things had changed. With each passing day, she found herself thinking about those towels, and their cummy wetness, more and more. On this particular morning, she carelessly grabbed a towel right in a spot that was still fairly fresh with his cum. Perhaps it wasn't entirely accidental, due to her deeper desires, but she didn't do it with conscious intent. Her first idea was to wipe her hand on another towel. But curiosity got the better of her. She brought her covered fingers up to her nose and took a good whiff. This smells pungent, but good. A little fruity even. Wait. What am I doing? This is terribly improper. This is my son's sexual spend. And yet, I can't help but be a little bit curious. Its texture almost feels like the moisturizer I use. I'm almost tempted to taste it. Ugh, no. No way. At that, she had wiped her hand on a clean part of the towel, collected his sheets and remaining dirty towels, and took them into the hallway. I'd better check on Angel's sheets as well. Over the last week her sheets have been getting suspicious damp spots as well. It seems like everyone in this house is slowly losing their mind. This sexing things up is necessary to help Tiger, but it seems to be affecting Angel as well. I'll have to make sure this doesn't go too far and this becomes a house of sin. I will not have it. Not on my watch. Sure enough, Catherine's sheets had some suspicious damp spots. So Susan ended up again with a few loads of laundry to deal with that day. Later, when she and Suzanne started their daily workout, she tried her best to pretend that everything was normal. But Suzanne could read her best friend like a book, so she started to ask probing questions about Susan's dreams. In a matter of minutes, Susan broke down and began to cry. It took another half hour or so, with a lot of crying, but Suzanne was finally able to get a full recounting of what the dream had been about. She immediately set about trying to reassure Susan and manage her emotions and perceptions. As she held Susan in a comforting hug, she said, "You know, this is good. Dreams like that are good." Susan had been resting her head against Suzanne's neck, but that statement caused her to jerk up in surprise. "Good. Are you crazy? Did you not hear what I said?" "I heard. But the thing is, this is all natural and healthy. Like I told you yesterday, dreams are a way we have of processing things that happen to us in real life. For instance, if you lose your purse, maybe you have a dream about your purse. Maybe you dream you find it, or maybe you have a bad dream where you lose it all over again. Whatever. The details aren't important. What matters is that you're blowing off steam, blowing off the anxiousness and worry you have about the purse in your dream so you won't be so worried about it in real life. Susan frowned. Well, okay. But this isn't a dream we're talking about here. We're talking about a sin. Terrible sin. Things that should never happen between mother and son. Suzanne said in a calm and even voice, that's all the more reason it's good to let out that energy in a dream instead of in reality. Let's face it. You saw Sweetie's penis by accident, and it turned out to be a very big and really impressive one. Long and thick and smooth, the kind of penis we women long for and adore. That left a big impact on you. Furthermore, your handsome son is now forced to climax 6 times a day. The fact that he can even manage to do that at all shows what a virile, sexually potent boy he is. Suzanne was deliberately using provocative language, as part of a general policy of constantly hyping Alan and his sexual prowess. She continued, you've been obliged to dress provocatively around him to help him out. Susan cut in, maybe I should stop doing that. Nonsense. And let down your tiger in his time of need. I think not. Susan pleaded, but can you promise me at least that I won't have to wear a French-maid outfit again? That's having a weird effect on me. Ever since I wore one of those sans underwear, it shows up in all my dreams. And worse, always without underwear. Suzanne replied, excellent. Just think. If it's having that kind of effect on you, what kind of effect will it have on your tiger? He'll be horny and hard all the time, thanks to his busty French-maid mother. Susan groaned, but it was a groan of frustration, not of lust. She really did find the French-maid outfit too much to take. Suzanne saw that, instantly concluding that maybe she was pushing too hard. Okay, fine. We'll put that outfit away for a good while. Susan smiled in grateful relief. Thank you. Suzanne smiled too. But in any case, add to that the fact that you're extremely sexually frustrated. You know a woman's sexual peak is in her late 30s, and yet your husband is gone for 11 months of the year. You're starved for sexual excitement, and then you see your well-hung, handsome son. Of course your body is going to react to that. You can't be blamed for that. That's human nature. Susan asked shyly and very quietly, but, hypothetically, what if I have dreams like that at night? And I have naughty thoughts during the day. Then, I say, you need more dreams like that one. Then you can burn off your sexual agitation while you sleep. Susan frowned unhappily. Suzanne said, I'm not just saying that. You know, a person can influence how often they dream, and how vividly they dream. The more you try to remember your dreams, the more you will dream. There are lots of books about this kind of stuff. What you need to do is try to remember all the details of your dreams as soon as you wake up, before your memories fade. Write them down in a dream journal. Then, talk them over with me. That way, we'll burn off all or almost all of your inappropriate sexual energy, and you'll still be able to give your tiger the visual stimulation that he so desperately needs. Susan still looked unhappy. But I can't write those things down. They're obscene. Positively obscene. Just writing them would be another sin probably, like creating pornography. Okay, you don't have to write them down. That was just a suggestion. That probably isn't necessary, as long as you replay them vividly in your mind and then tell them to me while your memories are still fresh. I can be a kind of judge or analyst, to make sure you burn off enough sexual energy in your dreams. Susan didn't like that idea at all. She considered her dreams about Alan highly personal, as well as extremely embarrassing. But Suzanne's words made sense, so she decided to follow her best friend's advice. She thought, I hope Suzanne's right, because I have far too much unhealthy and sinful sexual energy right now. I can't let her know how much my sinful thoughts about my son are haunting me. All I can think about is his member. I'm gonna need to dream 3, 4, or 5 times a night just to burn all of these evil feelings out of me. The terrible secret I can never tell anyone, not even Suzanne, is how much I like these sinful feelings. When I think about stroking his member, just like in that dream, it makes me so hot. Oh God! What a terrible, terrible, wicked thought. Later in the day, Suzanne brought Susan a book about dreams that detailed how one could remember one's dreams better. It reinforced everything Suzanne had said earlier, which reassured Susan considerably.